Every day, citizens around the country are faced with new dilemmas. Dilemmas that affect them profoundly. Whether it's injustice, discrimination, falling through the cracks, scandals and cronyism, balances of power, ethics, religious freedoms, state versus citizens, and unfunded mandates, and the list goes on and on and on. Welcome to Speak Up. It's directed at those who have fallen through the cracks, and it gives them a voice. It's your turn to speak up, to stand up and fight back.
Amherst from A1. We need PD here right now, please. Get me PD now! No, get me PD now!
Welcome to Speak Up. I'm Kevin Avard, State Representative here in Nashua, New Hampshire, and I have a few guests with me today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
It's Carylyn.
Yes.
McEntee.
Yes.
All right, we got it right. And Lynn Briggs.
Correct.
All right. And you both are public safety workers. Is that right?
Yes.
Correct. Emergency medical personnel.
Emergency.
Yeah.
Now, you are a paramedic.
Yes, I am.
And you are an EMT-1? Or
Intermediate, I.
And you're,
Intermediate, and I'm currently testing to become an advanced EMT.
and both of you, between the both of you, you have about 40 years of experience being in this field.
Correct.
Correct.
You've been doing this for quite a while. So you have an interesting story, and we wanted to get it out. So we could start right from the beginning. Basically, there was an incident. You had a call. There was an emergency call. Someone called 911, and you were the group to go out to this particular call.
Yes.
Something bad happened.
Yes.
And it wasn't to the person who needed the services. It was to you.
Correct.
All right, so 911, hello, you're on the scene.
It was May 31st, which was Memorial Day in 2010, and both of us were working part-time for the town of Amherst EMS, and our shifts usually start at 6 a.m. and go till 6 p.m. I went in at 4 a.m. because I was covering for somebody. Carol came in at 6, and our first call was early on, and it was upstairs at the police department to check a prisoner. And after checking that person, the dispatcher asked us, could we take another call? And we said, well, of course, we're finished here. And she said, oh, it's difficulty breathing. I'll tone you out, which is a noise that comes across the radio and dispatches you to an address and what you're going for, and et cetera. We immediately walked out to the ambulance, which was outside of the front door of the police department, and drove to the town of Mount Vernon. We were actually going mutual aid. We help out the town of Amherst with medical situations. They have their own police.
What town are you from?
We're from Amherst.
Amherst, okay.
Right.
All right, so you're going to Mount, and that's what, a 20-minute drive?
No.
No.
It was about 7 or 8 minutes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I'm thinking back roads, all right.
Yeah, it was back roads, but we knew where we were going, so we didn't have to worry about looking up things because we knew where we were going.
So everything's normal, routine at this point?
Absolutely, we
you're
had
heading
no
out
other
there?
radio transmission.
Right. We had the initial one, and that was it. Got in the
Yes.
truck, lights and sirens. It was for difficulty breathing, so had to move it along, but using due caution.
So you arrive at the scene, and all of a sudden you see two people coming out of the house. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Now, that to you, with all your experience, is a huge red flag.
Yes, it's a big red flag. And the reason for that is when people are coming out of their house or apartment, et cetera, they don't want you to see what's inside.
Okay.
So as we were walking up to the residence, a male and a female were coming out. The male was on the phone. They were arguing back and forth between themselves. We had no idea what their relationship was, and initially we both thought that they were husband and wife.
Yeah. They used
I
first
asked him-
names a lot,
Yeah.
so that led us to
Yeah.
think,
Absolutely. And he was still on the phone, and I said to him, are you on the phone with E911? And he said, yes. I said, you can tell them that we're here and you can hang up. And he said, okay. And when they got down to the bottom of the stairs, there's a lawn. And there was a suit coat on the lawn, spread out on the lawn, which was kind of unusual. No idea what that was for. And as soon as the female got close to it, she just sat down.
So she was walking towards
Yes.
you and sat on the
And she sat
Correct.
on the suit coat. And the male was to her left, but still standing up. And they were still arguing. So I said to the male, what's going on? I said, I don't think she has difficulty breathing because she's able to speak in full sentences. Her color was good. She didn't look like she was sweating, nothing. And
How close are you from this point on?
probably 4 or 5 feet away.
Right,
We're still
see that.
standing because we are very uncomfortable with the situation because of the arguing. We don't want to put ourselves into a situation where we would kneel down and then not be able to get back up again. So we were standing there, and as I asked the father what was going on, I asked him, you know, does she take any medications? Does she have any allergies to any medications? Has this ever happened before? All those, and I got no for all of those. And while I was talking to the father, Lynn was talking to, the male, he turned out to be her father. Lynn was talking to the female sitting on the suit coat.
What happened was she was approximately here and the father was over here. Carol was talking across and then I was talking across. So it was sort of a conversation this way. And she was, again, sitting down. She had exited with a scarf over her head and tossed across her lower face, which again was a strange sign for somebody that was having difficulty breathing. It kind of makes you wonder, what were you doing or why do you have this on? And when she sat down in the suit coat, pulled the scarf off. I listened to this conversation and I asked her the same questions because nothing was coming together. And I said, are you having any difficulty breathing? No. She's speaking full sentences. Everything is checking out. Are you on any medications? No. Repeating the exact same answers. No, no, no. So I finally just looked at her and said, is there any chance something's happened? Are you feeling anxious? And it was like somebody flipped a switch and she just let out this huge yell and said some really disgusting, disgusting language, stood up and headbutted me full in towards the throat and chin.
Did she say that she was going to something kill you?
Yes. I was going to say, as she came up, headbutting me, she says, I'm going to kill you, you blah, blah, blah.
Now, as in your profession, there is another person involved here. There is a driver as well. Is that correct?
We had a third EMT, but at this point, she was not in our line of vision. I can't answer for what was going on because we were just close proximity, the four of us.
Right. I just wanted to establish that there was another person.
Correct.
Probably somewhere within the purview, but could she hear what was going on, or?
I believe at that point, I don't know. I don't know whether she was still coming from the ambulance. Things happened very, very, very quickly.
So I'm going to blank and kill you.
Correct.
And then she headbutts you.
She headbutted me full. She was going for I felt my airway. So I started to pull back, and Carol saw this movement and yelled, no, put her hands up and deflected the blow. So what happened was, initially I thought she had dislocated my jaw, but it's called subluxated, which is a partial. And so I couldn't talk, my jaw was over here, but Carol was able to deflect her enough that she didn't hit me full and take out my airway. And immediately she turned and went after Carol and headbutted her in the chest, driving her back 10 feet. And I just took my jaw, pushed it, and crunched it, and I turned, and I went right after, pulling, and all of us went down on the ground.
Where's the father?
The father is standing there watching.
Did you happen to observe, was he surprised?
He had no expression on his face at that time at all.
He didn't utter a word.
Did he lend a hand?
Nothing.
No, he
Just
did not.
stood there.
He just stood there.
Was
we
he
were
on the phone at the
rolling
time?
around.
No, he had hung up by that time from
He
911.
did hang up,
Yes.
okay.
Correct.
So,
Yes.
so lunches after you go to block, then you go to help
Pull her off of
because now she's
Carol.
on you.
Correct.
She was on me, and we were rolling around on the grass, and I was trying to find an arm that I could grab a hold of.
Was she out of her mind at this point?
I don't know.
We don't know.
She
It's
was-
just that a very, very, very violent outburst with absolutely disgusting language. And we both work full-time 911. I worked full-time 911 in Manchester, originally with Rockingham, and went to AMR. Carol's full-time with Golden Cross. We're both Speedway, work up at Speedway in the season with motorcycles and NASCAR, and then part-time at Amherst. So this, someone says they're going to kill you, you hear that quite often. The police officers do. But this was completely different. It was over and over.
So you've seen people on drugs.
Correct.
Yes.
You've seen people mentally challenged.
Yes.
Correct.
You've seen people drunk, depressed. Over 40 years between the both of you, you've basically seen it all. This one caught you by surprise.
Yes, very much so. I've taken care of Hell's Angels, and they had more respect for us than this girl did. And quite frankly, she had the filthiest mouth I've ever heard. I never heard anything like that from the Hell's Angels that you would expect.
Interesting. So you're rolling on the ground.
Yes.
You're looking for an arm.
Yeah.
You're fighting, you're tossing. Somehow you get her into a hold.
Onto her back. And
Onto her back.
Carol was across her torso and got control of the right arm. And I was at her shoulders and head and had control of the left arm. By this time, the third EMT had gotten in to our view, and she was across the lower legs. But her head was turned so that we couldn't have any eye contact or any conversation. So it was pretty much Carol and I were maybe 2 feet away, very close to each other, and fighting for our lives, quite frankly, at this point.
Now, in off camera, you said to me that you basically, you looked up and you kind of whispered a quick prayer because you thought your life was, this woman was very strong.
Very strong.
Very strong, again, very violent. The outbursts, there'd be an outburst and then there'd be a pause. There'd be an outburst and then there'd be a pause. So to someone, you would assume that the fight would just be continual, but it would stop and then it would restart again, and very well planned, very significant way of going after us. Went after both of our right hands and right arms, both of our, finding out afterwards.
So
Significant. We're talking airways, then we're talking arm, and then she reared up at one point.
Yeah.
and bit her.
As we were trying to gain control, I was over her, and I had her right arm. Lynn was trying to get her left arm back far enough so she could control her better. And during this little altercation at that time, she was able to bring herself up almost to a sitting position.
Both of you on her.
Yes, almost to a sitting position, and that's when she bit me on the elbow, and I couldn't let go.
I think that was the most disgusting, I shouldn't laugh, but the most disgusting sound I've ever heard. I was, inches from it, and the blood spurted initially. Closed up very quickly because there's no fat there, and just swole. It was huge. It was like this huge little soccer ball on her elbow, and it's in my full view. And so I have stuff on me, and she's trying to fight with her arm, and I'm now worried about what are we going to do. And I look up and I try to take a breath. Every time I'd reposition myself, with my thighs, because I was up near the head, she'd try and bite me in the legs.
So you're fighting that because you heard the crunch over there.
Right, so now she's trying to bite me, so I try to get more control of the left arm so that I can keep her down, I can keep her from biting, and she spits full in your face. So now both of us are exposed to bodily fluids, and we can't let go, wipe it away.
So this brings to me, okay, we're struggling for our lives. Where's the third person? Hello, help me.
Yeah.
Where is she?
On the legs, holding the legs down.
The third person's on the legs.
Yes, she's been on the legs the whole time. And I'm just thinking, where are we going with this next? The words of how she's going to kill us. Just very, very detailed, very specific, very graphic, and very violent.
And the father is still with all three of you.
Still standing.
Did he whisper into your ear something?
No, what happened was...
or look at you and say something.
Yeah, she tried to rear up again, and she was trying to bite Carylyn in the neck. And so I pulled her down, and while I was pulling her down, I looked up and took a deep breath. And quite frankly, I said a silent prayer. I wanted both of us to live.
Yeah.
Just give me the strength, help us.
Right.
And we made eye contact, Carylyn and I, got her back down, and she mouthed to me radio and positioned herself, and I got myself ready. Whether I was going to be bitten in the leg or what was going to happen, I had to get to my radio mic, and it's a strap that we carry, and the radio is in it, and it has a microphone that comes to your shoulder. And I was able to get my right hand up, push the button, and call for police backup. Oh. Yeah, I actually called 4 times.
You called 4 times?
I called 4 times. And the scary part was, from the beginning of the call till the time that the first police officer arrived, we never heard a siren. We never had any radio contact.
How long did it take them to get there?
It was 14 minutes.
So you're struggling on the ground for 14 minutes after the phone call, after the help call.
Yeah.
And did the dad say something like, don't hurt her or something?
Yes, he knelt down next to me and said, don't hurt her. And I looked at him and I said, don't hurt her. She just bit me. And the pain from the bite was very intense, but I knew I couldn't let go. If I did, something worse would happen. So I just held on and waited and waited. And I even said to Lynn, try and leave the mic open so they can hear her screaming.
Were you able to do that?
I wasn't, because my hand was injured at that time, so I could just kind of get enough, I need backup now.
All right, so 14 minutes later, the cops show up.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where did they come from? From Mount Vernon?
No, they came from Amherst.
The police came from Amherst?
Yes.
You're in Mount Vernon at this time?
Yes.
Correct.
Is that normal?
Well, Mount Vernon does not have 24/7 police coverage. There are some towns that don't. So
Generally,
usually,
state police will cover for them in the interim.
Yes, state police is there to cover for all the towns that don't have 24/7 police coverage. At this particular time, since our communication center was Amherst, they called Amherst police to come and help us. But Milford police also
Eventually
respond mutually. They did not come to ours.
They weren't called.
They weren't
really?
called.
Yes. We actually, the only time we knew that we had been heard, that anybody was there, is we heard a car door slam. And we just kind of looked at each other saying, oh, I hope this is what I think it is. Because again, no sirens, no sound, no talking. At one point I had heard, and it's on the actual 911 tape from Concord, that one of the officers had said, what is the location? And I was able to grab the mic quickly and say, this is where we are, but I don't believe he heard us. And that was an issue. And on the 911 tape, listening afterwards, I believe they had to switch to the Milford dispatch because they couldn't hear from our dispatch in Amherst. So it was awfully weird, but that's, finding out afterwards. But it's a long time, and you hear footsteps. You don't hear shouting. You don't hear running. Just somebody walks up, kneels in front of Carylyn and said, "What's going on?"
Yeah, and
One police officer.
Well, there were two that showed up, but one police officer knelt down
Correct.
to me and said, "What's going on? And what happened to your elbow?" And I said, "She bit me."
And we're still holding her.
What did they do at this point?
Basically, she realized that there were two more people there and they were police officers, so she started all over again with the threats.
I'm going to kill you.
With the babbling and foul language and significant comments that are designed to inflame and upset people, and really just started rearing up. She could lift her whole body up 2 feet, 3 feet off the ground. So the two officers from Amherst then came and assisted us, and they handcuffed her. And again, the father, for only the second time in this entire period, said, "Be careful, don't hurt her arm." And so they handcuffed her, and she was still kicking and kicking, so they ended up having to restrain her legs. At that point, I was able to go into the ambulance with Carylyn and take care of her arm, double-check ourselves, and get some medication.
Now, did the state police eventually arrive?
Yes.
They did, and so did the chief of police of Mount Vernon, Kyle Aspinwall. Can't give you an exact time frame, but it was after she had been handcuffed and subdued. I think they arrived within a few seconds of each other. Okay. We never actually spoke to this state police officer, and Chief Aspinwall actually engaged with the father at that point. Some kind of conversation was going on, but we weren't privy to it, the full details. There were a few things that we heard. The father then started giving a few details to Chief Aspinwall that he denied to us.
Who is the father?
His name is Romulo Valdez. He's a psychologist.
Is he a local psychologist here?
Yes.
Does he practice locally?
Yes, as far as we could figure out, it's in Manchester, and he also has an office in Bedford.
Is he in practice with anybody?
I believe he has a partner or somebody that he works with in Bedford, but I'm not aware of that name. But I know he works or has privileges maybe at several of the hospitals, but that's been kept.
Hush, hush.
Hush, hush.
You're married to a police officer.
Yes, I am.
And your son or your brother is a firefighter as well. So you're very familiar with this whole, along with your experience, you must have run this by your husband.
We've discussed it a little bit.
And he must have been a little bit disturbed at
he was concerned. Yeah. He had obviously different concerns from his point of view. Right. He's been a police officer for 32 years. He's now retired. He was 10 years in Merrimack and 22 down for the Boston MBTA. So had a different view. And Carolyn's brother's a battalion chief in Providence, which is a very, very busy city. And actually, her brother and my husband had the same concerns.
What are some of your biggest concerns right now? We're sitting in the ambulance, and you're hurt.
Yes.
You're hurt. Your jaw's dislocated. It looks like your arm was hurt as well.
Right.
The commotion is starting to settle down. Now you're probably getting the shakes.
Just to say a little bit. Just a little bit. It was still...
Actually, not yet. Yeah. But the biggest thing for me was that after she was handcuffed, no one was making any decisions as to, are we going to arrest her and put her in the cruiser? Is she going to the hospital with them? What's happening? Who's going to take them?
Where's the other ambulance? Where is some other services? Because I think obviously hurt and the circumstances that perhaps there should have been a...
What is the protocol for this particular situation?
Well, apparently there isn't one in Amherst because there wasn't any protocol followed. They stated that there weren't any other ambulances and we were it. So I figured by this time I'm going to have to take her to the hospital, and she needed to be medicated first. And that's actually why I went into the ambulance because I didn't think much was going to be done with my elbow at that particular time. I just really wanted to take care of her and get her to a place where she needed to be.
So you're still acting very professional. You're not. You're still going through what you need to do to make sure that she's
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Still no signs of her being in any type of trauma, needing emergency care at this point.
No.
You're the ones that are hurt, right?
Right.
Correct.
You know, asking her father, who by this point in time we knew he was a psychologist, so he had some sort of medical knowledge about the medication she took. No. Does she have any allergies to any medications? No. Has this ever happened before? No.
Was her blood sugar low?
Her blood sugar was, once we got her into the ambulance, we did her blood sugar, and it was perfectly normal.
Which is a standard test that you give people.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, so now you're sitting here, you've gone through all the tests, the protocols, you've given her, did you give her a sedative of some sort?
Yes, I gave her an antipsychotic drug called Haldol, and we are given that drug per protocol for the state of New Hampshire for behavioral and violent situations, which we had both. So I came back out of the ambulance and gave her a shot. It has to be intramuscular. Gave her the shot, explained to her father what it was, and he nodded his head that that was good. And then we had to wait for a significant time for it to take effect.
What are the police doing at this point?
I believe the chief is talking with the father. The state officer, police officer, I think was having more of a conversation, from what I remember and seeing out of the corner of my eye, with Chief Aspinwall. And the two Amherst police officers waited until the medication took effect. And at this point, we were unable to lift. And at that point, we didn't realize why. We just knew we couldn't lift with our hands. And they put her on a backboard and onto the stretcher, and with the third EMT, the three of them put her into the ambulance, and we took care of her from there. At one point, I opened up the back of the ambulance, the doors, and I spoke to Chief Aspinwall and said, we're going to be transporting to St. Joe's Hospital. And at that point, I was told that the father had said, no, we're going to Southern New Hampshire, and that he had had a brief discussion with Carylyn. And it just struck me a little odd because the patient had very clearly stated she wanted to go to St. Joe's and had indicated she had been there before. So I didn't think too much of it, just sort of stuck it in my memory. And then when the father and Chief Aspinwall said, no, we want to take her to Southern, we said, okay, well, that is, they have an access team. That's certainly a good choice. And if that's what you choose to do, then we'll do that.
By the way, you're telling me all this medical stuff. Is this breaking a HIPAA violation?
No.
HIPAA
does not enter into the situation if a patient states they want to harm someone or they want to harm themselves.
Right. So did you end up taking her to the hospital?
Yes, we did. We took her to the hospital. She was treated like any other patient would have been, with kindness and professionalism. And we brought her to Southern New Hampshire. We brought her to the access team. I gave my report, which we do for every patient, to the nurse. And on the way to the hospital, we always give a patch, it's called, to the hospital, telling them what's going on, what has been going on, and we asked that security meet us there because she was violent.
My question, is anybody taking care of you at this point?
No. Once she was taken care of, a couple of the nurses that we knew said, let me take care of your bite, let me clean that, or please stay and be treated. And at that point, Lynn did not want to stay in the same emergency room with her.
Right.
So actually our medical resource hospital that we get our medications from, et cetera, is St. Joe's. So we thanked them and we left, and the third EMT drove us to St. Joe's.
talk about the debrief. I mean, how did your superiors handle all of this? How were you treated?
Well, when we went to St. Joseph's Hospital, they treated us very, very well. In fact, they opened up their fast track in the emergency room, which is for, you know, small lacerations, sore throats, earaches, etc. But they opened it up just for us to keep us away from the regular emergency room, which has all our friends in it,
right,
from EMS, etc., and the nurses. So we were treated there. Kyle Aspinwall, the police chief from Mount Vernon, came down to St. Joe's. He had followed us in his cruiser in the behind the ambulance. He came to find out how we were and to introduce his prosecutor from the town of Mount Vernon, who was going to be taking some photographs of our injuries.
He brought a prosecutor with him. Okay, so this is...
Yeah.
Well, in the smaller towns, they have a police officer that usually has a second hat, and that says the prosecutor for misdemeanor charges.
Right.
But I think it was just more gathering some evidence. He needed somebody else down to try and take some photos, and obviously at that point, we didn't know what the injuries were. So
is this a misdemeanor?
Excuse me?
We don't know. We were never ever told until August 11th what the charges were. They were never discussed.
Right, so he's taken, he took pictures of your arms and of your injuries as well?
Yes.
He took a couple, actually we've never seen them, but I believe he took a picture of your arm, of the elbow, and I think he took a couple pictures of my ribs, but at that time, we just hadn't met with the doctor and hadn't discussed what was actually wrong, what our injuries were. So there wasn't much that they could really take pictures of at that point. He asked a couple questions, but the important part was Chief Aspinwall at that point had said, well, the father came up to me as he was leaving Southern and said, are those EMTs going to be pressing charges? And Chief Aspinwall looked at him and said, no, I am.
Oh.
And that was pretty much the last conversation we had had. We got back at the station about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So as you can see, a long, long time period. We were asked to do an incident report, which is basically a one-paragraph comment description of what had happened. And we left it for our department head, the head of Amherst EMS, and a copy went up to Amherst PD. There was no interrogation or questioning. There was no, they didn't have specific questions and ask us anything. So at that point, we just did this little paragraph. We did the New Hampshire State Tempsis report, which is an official report you do for every patient, and it's submitted to the state. We finished that and essentially went home. I had called, I believe, our director, Brian Gleason, at some point, either in the ambulance or when we got to St. Joe's, I had called him and said and explained to him what had happened. He didn't answer the phone, and I left a message. No one showed up at the hospital except for Chief Aspinwall. We had no one from the town. We didn't have any, another department had anybody come and speak to us. No one said, how are you? Not a card, not a flower, not a phone call, nothing.
Right. After a period of time, not a card, not a flower, not a phone call, not an
But not even a phone call on that day, nothing.
That evening, I received a phone call.
Okay.
And it was about 10 o'clock at night, and it was from the Amherst EMS director, Brian Gleason. And he said, oh my goodness, oh my Lord, I can't believe this has happened. And
so he recognizes something serious happened.
yes, but he never once said, how are you? What are your injuries? Nothing. It was all about him. Well, in the 10 years that I've been the director, we've never had a workers' comp claim before. Oh my Lord, I can't believe this is happening. And he said, well, he goes, this is really something. He said, and when this is all over, I'm going to take you girls out to Amigos for margaritas.
Now, I'm still, in my mind, I'm still back at the crunch.
Yeah.
With the elbow. And
Well, I'm certainly not going to
Right.
Amigos because they have chicken wings, and to this day I cannot.
But it's
stuff
the
like that.
seriousness of the
Yes.
event that I feel the trauma in my mind that you're going through. You're hanging on for dear life, and you're getting a promise of, hey, you know, good job, huh? Take one for the team.
Yep. Exactly.
And the whole idea of, did you file a workers' comp claim?
Yes.
Okay.
We filed a workers, well, actually, he filed a workers' comp claim in our behalf. We never filled out a workers' comp claim. We never signed anything. He filled it out. We were perfectly able to come in and fill out that workers' comp claim, and we did not.
Okay.
We did not receive any debriefing from this whole incident, which was not only very physically difficult, it was psychologically difficult for us also. There is a group called the CISD team, Critical Incident Stress Debriefing Team for the state of New Hampshire, and they're wonderful. And they all operate on a volunteer basis. And all you have to do is call them, and they set up a debriefing to come and talk to you. And if you need more, then your employer is supposed to.
Did he set this up with you?
No,
So
he did
you've
not.
gotten no support after these injuries.
Nothing.
Are you still going on call after this?
No.
No.
You're taking time off.
By the time we finished the incident report and gave a copy to the officers upstairs, I had a brief conversation with the dispatcher at the time, and I believe she said, "Are you guys okay?" and made a few other comments that were a little strange. We went back downstairs, and it was approximately 3 p.m., and this is when the other crew walked in.
The other crew.
They finally found somebody to replace us. So I guess the town of Amherst was being covered mutual aid by perhaps Milford, Bedford, Merrimack, somebody, because they couldn't find anybody back when the incident happened at 8 o'clock, 8:15. They didn't have a crew to replace us, to either replace us
We're still
and
back on the
take her
same day.
down. We're still on the same day.
We're still on the same day.
And no, they couldn't find anybody to replace us till 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
So you were not relieved. You're
Apparently not. We
Apparently
told them that we were out of service.
Right, unfit for duty.
So that would mean they would not contact us for a call, that they would automatically go to mutual aid from any of the towns surrounding Amherst or Mount Vernon. So, but we had no idea that there wasn't another crew.
Is there a protocol to help? Is there anything in statute, or are there any defense mechanisms that you have that are on the books that you folks that can take advantage of when you go to a call? Are you allowed to defend yourself in situations like this? Is there anything there that can? I mean, can you carry a sidearm or a stun gun?
No weapons. You're not allowed to carry anything. No pepper spray. You are, most of the incidents described in the books, if you look in any of the books and you talk to anybody, you are to retreat. You are to leave the scene. You are to get in the ambulance and lock the doors and not put yourself in danger. But this was not a regular scenario that they have in the books, that they discuss in all the classes. We were going there for respiratory difficulty breathing, and immediately were assaulted, injured. At this point, we don't know if she has a weapon. We don't know if the man has a weapon. We don't know if my calls for backup were heard. I pushed the red button, which is an emergency button that we use in Manchester and Nashua and up at Golden Cross. We have no idea whether that worked. Can't get to a phone. It's not like I can go, oh, help, dial the phone and say, are you coming? We were fighting for our lives. We were also fighting to keep her under control, that she didn't injure herself any farther.
And the psychologist just stood there.
He just stood there.
Just stood there watching.
He stood there watching us. And at one point I looked up at him to maybe get him out of his fog if he was in one to come and help us.
Could he have been in shock?
Maybe, but he's a psychologist. He's been a psychologist for a very long time. He specializes in anxiety,
PTSD.
depression, PTSD, by his own admission. And one time when I looked up at him, he was looking at the three of us on the ground fighting, and he had a smirk on his face. Almost like he was enjoying this.
Okay, all right. I want to skip back to. I'm just kind of reliving the moment, but I want to get back to the workers' comp thing. Now you didn't file papers. No support was given to you after the fact.
No.
How many days after the fact? Nothing.
We had one brief meeting approximately a week later. We all met at Amherst EMS, and it was Chief Aspinwall, Carol, myself, the third girl, and Brian Gleason. And the meeting was because Chief Aspinwall was coming back from Merrimack District Court, and that was her arraignment at that point.
But he's on top of this, right?
He's on top of this.
Yes.
We don't know what the charges are. We actually don't know anything except she was arraigned, she made bail, and our department head, Brian Gleason, turned his head and looked at us and said, oh, well, she cleans up well, apparently. She looked nothing like she did on the day she attacked you. And we kind of looked at each other and said, well, what does that have to do with the price of eggs?
Right.
I thought this was a meeting to get down with some specifics, maybe some debriefing. I did mention, you know, could we get some help? Could we maybe, and he said this is an ongoing criminal case. And
Who said that?
The department head.
Not the chief of police.
No. And the meeting went on and really didn't accomplish too much except for to go over some of the medical facts. And at that point, Carylyn and I had an appointment with St. Joe's Occupational Health, which had been set up by the ER. And we had another appointment with them, so we had to leave and go to that. From that point on, we were never contacted until what? I think the day of the court, August 11th.
Yes.
We never heard from anybody until August 11th.
But one interesting note is that during this conversation at Amherst EMS, our EMS director said, you know, you may have a statement or something someone will ask you. Don't expect too much. Don't go for anything more than a weekend in jail because she's not going to get it.
Now, why would he say such a
I
thing?
don't know.
Is he connected to the psychologist?
I don't know.
Just a very
strange situation. He also said that Daddy has very deep pockets.
This is what your director said to you?
Yes.
Now, that right there is a chilling moment. That right there, after going through this,
that right there was...
Meaning, okay, so there's not going to be justice? Is that what he's trying to tell you?
Exactly.
Just
That's
brace
what we
yourself?
felt like.
Yeah.
Right.
Whether or not that's what he
And
meant.
you both heard this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where's the third person?
She's there.
She's sitting at the table.
She heard this too? All right. And she's not here for some reason. She doesn't want to get involved, or?
We've had no contact with her from that point on. Never came to any of the court cases.
Except one.
Except for one, and has never had any interaction.
She wasn't injured at any.
She wasn't
she's
injured.
just the
She had
driver.
like a little strain, I think, in her shoulder, but she wasn't even X-rayed in the emergency room that day that
And
we
I don't
went.
believe she missed any work.
All right, so let's move beyond this point. Now you're at. Is it August 11th? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yes.
Essentially, Carylyn had her first right arm surgery. I had my right arm surgery. I had briefly gone in July and done maybe 4 hours, 8 hours of light duty because the workman's comp had said, you're clear, you need to do some light duty. And in doing that light duty, it made my injury to my right hand so much worse that the very next day I had to go see the surgeon, and he ended up reconstructing my right hand. So both of us had broken right hands. The ligament off our thumb had been torn off, and we both had ligament damage to the outside of the hand. And this took a while to unravel, but by August 11th, 2.5 months later, it was very evident
and
that
you have the medical documentation for all that, obviously, right?
We have our surgeons who had done the actual surgery, and by August 11th, I was 2 days, maybe 3 days out of surgery, and I had a full surgical cast on my arm. It hadn't been changed to a hard cast. And we went to this court hearing, arraignment, I'm not really sure what the correct terminology is, but we went to this for August 11th at Milford District Court. And we had read it in the newspaper.
No one called.
No one had ever called us. No one.
What newspaper did this?
There were several newspapers. During the course of the summer, she had been arrested, I think, an additional 3-4 times. And we had been reading this. She had assaulted 2 Nashua police officers, and I have worked in Nashua, and felt very strongly about this, and so did Carylyn, that we needed to back them. So we followed the stories, and we had watched.
What's her name?
Her name is Adrienne Valdez.
Adrienne Valdez.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And that's all public knowledge. And we had just watched this unraveling, and the lawyers saying that it's a mental illness, that her meds were wrong, and we're sitting here saying, but father denied any history, any medical history, any medications, that she had never been transported before, yet she said she had been there to St. Joe's a couple days before.
And you did blood
very
work
strange.
in the ambulance.
No, we don't do blood work.
How did you test the sugar?
Oh, you can do that with a little finger stick.
Okay, but we also had given her some IV therapy, access,
fluid.
just in case, just fluid. And so you can take that from there as well.
So you're following the story now, and you wanted to back up the National Police because, wait, something's not jiving here.
Right.
Yep, and so we read the newspapers and we say, oh, Milford District Court for the assault on the 3 EMTs. So we say, well, we're going to that.
And you were not notified?
No, we were not notified at all.
Not one word. We had no idea what was going on.
You're not witnesses in the trial?
No.
Was this a pre-hearing or?
I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I couldn't answer that for you. We just know that there's something going on at Milford District Court that involved the 3 EMTs who were assaulted in Mount Vernon. And that's what we read in multiple newspapers. So we show up. And we show up and we ask, where do we sit? Where do we go? Nobody answers us. Nobody really, well, go sit over there. We'll call you when it's your case. Who are you? Well, we're 2 of the EMTs that were assaulted.
You told that to the bailiff?
Yes. To the bailiff, court officers, yep. And they were very polite, but absolutely no information. At one point, we see Chief Aspinwall, walking around in the courthouse, and
he was very, very angry.
Did he recognize that you were there?
Oh, yes.
At that point?
Yes.
Right. Did any of her attorneys recognize that you were there?
Yes, very pointedly staring at us, pointing at us, whispering, run into a room, come back out, look and see where we are. We're feeling very uncomfortable, so we asked, could we have a room on our own? And I understand, as is Carol, that we're entitled to have some privacy and not be exposed, and they had no room for us, so we had to go sit at the end of the hall.
Are these videoed by any chance, these court cases?
Not that we know of.
Yeah, that seems to
we
be...
have tapes,
audio
tapes.
You have audio
There's
tapes.
an audio tape, and we have that.
And the testimony, the court testimony.
But we still didn't know really what was going on.
The reason I'm asking that there are people that are looking at some legislation because they're pressing for open courts where people have these things, documented on video.
Absolutely.
On video.
So that everything can be established, not a oops, we lost a transcript type of thing.
Right.
All right, so
we had no idea what to do but sit there and wait. And a woman approached us, and she said, are you the EMTs that were hurt in Mount Vernon? And we said, yes. And she said, well, I'm Nancy Bean Foster from the Union Leader. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions? And we said, fine. And she said, you know what's going on, don't you? And both of us looked at each other and shook our heads and said, no, we don't. What's going on? She said, well, she attacked her brother last night with a butcher knife. So she was arrested and spent the night at Valley Street Jail, and she was arraigned this morning on that charge, and then the next arraignment was going to be for our charge.
Okay, so this was not, is this all going to happen in the same day?
Correct.
Yes.
Right, all right.
Yes, it was.
So our case has been pushed to the afternoon, is what
Right.
she explained to us, because they were busy dealing with the incident from that night.
Yeah.
And she was arrested in Mount Vernon, so Chief Aspinwall was having to deal with this new arrest from that night and deal with this person yet again. And he was there for our case. So,
Was the father there?
yes,
He was
Yes,
there.
but not initially.
correct.
Was he there for her arraignment?
Yes.
With,
And so was
on
her
yours?
mother.
Okay.
For our portion. We don't know who was in the courtroom for the first part.
First
We
part,
just know
no
that
idea.
Nancy Bean Foster said, I'm going in, I'm sitting up front, I will tell you what's going on. And she came back out and relayed that there were some pretty nasty words and some not very nice things going on, and apparently Chief Aspinwall had gone in and spoken to the judge. He was very upset and came back out. We had
Who
quite
was the judge?
it was Judge Paul Moore.
Paul Moore?
Yes.
Superior Court? Is that,
I don't believe so. It's district court,
District
and he spends most of his time up in Concord, from what I understand, and does a lot of work in the mental health court up there.
her name is Viola? What does it-
Adrian Valdez.
Adrian, why did I say Viola? Adrian Valdez. Did she see you in the court?
She saw us once we got into the court
Okay.
room itself, not the courthouse, but in the courtroom,
Right.
because she was being held in another part that's reserved for prisoners, because she was handcuffed and shackled at this point in time.
So the police chief saw that you were there?
Yes.
The attorney saw that you were there?
Yes.
The father saw that you were there?
Yes,
She eventually saw that you were there?
yes.
A lot of people saw you there in the courtroom.
Correct.
Take us to the arraignment now. What happened?
We enter the room, and we sit at the back. Quite frankly, I've just had surgery. I don't want to be anywhere near her,
Right.
the family, and we assumed that someone would say, okay, could you move up here? You're going to testify something. So we just sat at the back and waited. And the door opens, and this man comes in. He looks at us and says, are you Carylyn and Lynn? And we said, yes. And Carylyn goes, and who are you? And he says, well, I'm Ross McLeod, the assistant county prosecutor.
Ross McLeod.
Ross McLeod. And he said, I want to talk to you afterwards. And we sort of looked at each other and said,
Who is
okay.
he is the assistant, who is the
County prosecutor for the state.
Okay, and who's his boss?
His boss is Robert Walsh.
Robert Walsh.
Robert Walsh, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And
We didn't have any idea what the format is for a case. Whenever I had gone to court to testify, I was always outside until it was my turn to testify, came in, testified, and left. I didn't know what our role was supposed to be during this, or what anyone's role was, quite frankly.
Right.
So I don't know.
So you know where I'm going with this, obviously. So six
Right.
people have at least acknowledged that you're there in the
Correct.
courtroom, and somebody wants to talk to you after they're done. Okay, so now the judge, Judge Moore says...
Judge Moore comes to the bench, and the two attorneys for Adrian approach the bench, J.C. Sacalaria Sr. and David Balinson, and Ross McLeod approached the bench. There's a lot of whispering. There's some back and forth. Nancy Bean Foster is sitting right up in the front, and she can hear the conversation, whereas we can't. We're in the back. We can hear certain words, but not the full conversation. And Judge Moore asks them, are the EMTs in the courtroom?
Could you yell, yeah, here I am?
Well, no, we didn't know if we could do that. We didn't know if it was
No one's
against
really,
the rules. We
Right.
never have
and
been
they
involved
said,
in this
no,
before.
they're not here.
Who said that?
At least two of the lawyers, I don't know if Ross McLeod, or whether just by saying nothing it was agreeing, but they said, no, they're not in the courtroom. And then Judge Moore said, are the parties, which includes us, Are they in full agreement? Have they been made aware of this agreement, that the charges have been reduced, blah, blah, blah. Yes, Your Honor, we know this. No one had ever spoken to us.
You don't know what the charges are, and you didn't know that they were being reduced, and you're sitting there in the courtroom, and you're not being acknowledged.
Correct.
If you were acknowledged, would you have gone up to testify?
Of course.
Yes. If they had asked us to, yes. If we had known that there were charges, just nothing seemed to fit any pattern that we know.
So you didn't even agree to these charges being dropped?
Absolutely.
We didn't even know what the charges
We didn't know what they were.
Did the chief of police agree to this?
He never came into the room. We found out afterwards that Chief Aspinwall was so angry just from the arrest from the night before, and apparently he had been told just before we went in that the charges had been reduced, null prossed, and everything put into Nashua Mental Health Court. And he was angry, and apparently he had a private conversation with the judge, but we weren't privy to it and didn't find out for months.
So the deep pockets come to mind. Daddy's got deep pockets. That's interesting. Now,
I don't know why she needed 2 lawyers, but nonetheless, she had 2 lawyers.
and the charges are dropped to a misdemeanor?
The felony was dropped to a misdemeanor,
Yeah.
and then all the misdemeanors were reduced. And
What was the felony charge now? Do you know? Did they go back and say what the original charge
no,
was?
they've never fully explained. Was it the bite? Was it the broken hand? And at that point, no one had even spoken to us about why we had surgery. Were there any new injuries beyond that day that everybody keeps quoting, cuts, bruises, bumps, and lacerations? Everybody's under the impression that we've just...
Also, the next time you go out on call, I'm thinking, okay, I'm unpacking at this point. That's got to be in the back of your mind now at this point. Having suffered that, and I'm not trying to make this a big injury case for you, but I'm just trying to get into, that's what would be in my head. That would be continually in my head.
Well, I was out of work initially for a year before I went back. The people that I work with were very well acquainted with what happened to me. They called every week. My supervisor called me every week to find out how I was doing. There were a couple of days when I didn't have anyone to take care of me after I had my cervical spine surgery that they found out later that was injured. And they came down from Vermont, which is almost an hour and a half away, to take care of me for the day. And we had one call that there was a psychiatric issue where a woman, now we can go to Springfield Hospital either up Route 91, which is the Vermont State Police, which are fantastic, or we could go through these small towns and go up. It's 6 of one, half a dozen of another, how long it takes. But I noticed that my partner who was driving was going up through the little towns, and I asked him when we left off the patient, why did you do that? Why didn't you go up 91? He said, well, I figured if something was going to happen, it would probably be upwards of 10 minutes before we got a trooper, but each one of those towns that we went through had 24/7 police coverage, and I knew we could get someone very quickly, under 5 minutes. So I wanted to make sure you were safe.
Yeah. They would even send messages to me, because it was also a company that employed us for Speedway in the summertime, and they sent messages to me through Carylyn and directly, when are you guys coming back? But yet my full-time company and the part-time company, Amherst EMS, which I live in Amherst, and my son and I volunteer in addition to a paid shift. I have 8,000 volunteer hours in 4 years. My son has 4,000. There's a couple other families that have even more than that. So I work a full-time job, and then I bring back what I learn to my town, to share with my town. It's not something I do after working a different job all day long. And to have absolutely no anything, no support. Everybody turns their back on me on the town. Firefighters that have ridden in my ambulance, police officers that I've helped transport, worked at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, shoulder by shoulder, and it's my seasonal job and Carylyn's company that is supporting me when nobody else does. And then 9 months after the assault, I'm medically cleared. My arm has healed to a point where they feel I'm medically cleared, and I go back. I found myself a new full-time job, which was with AMR in Manchester 911. Started there, and then I was cleared to go back to Amherst, where I was injured. And there were some emails back and forth, and it was like pulling teeth to try and get a shift back. And in the end, they terminated me.
I wanted to recap a couple of things. With the injuries, let's talk a little bit about, I know we've gone through in detail with some of the injuries, but really there's a little bit more to this than meets the eye. You were struck very hard to where you had some spinal cord injuries.
I did.
One more blow could have crippled you.
Could have. When I was hit and driven back, I banged my head on the ground. And the first indication that I was having any sort of problem with my hand when I initially went to the hospital was I said to the doctor, my thumb is numb. And he said, well, was it before? And I said, no, but my thumb is numb. I can't feel it. And, of course, the bite. And things progressed. After I had the first surgery, things were more, my fingers were numb, tingly, et cetera, et cetera. So the surgeon said, I want you to go to the spine surgeon and have him look at you. And he ordered an MRI. And I don't know if you've ever had an MRI, but it's pretty bad, especially when you have PTSD. It's very close quarters. Right. And so I had a lovely person at the MRI center in Londonderry stay in there with me and hold my hand because I couldn't have done it.
Right.
That was on a Tuesday. I was supposed to see the spine surgeon the following Tuesday. And the next morning, I got a phone call.
Okay.
Can you come in tomorrow? I went, ooh, this must be pretty bad. And she goes, oh, I don't know. I haven't seen it. This was passed all around the office because it was so hellacious. But I went in to see him, and my spinal cord was compressed 50% from ruptured disc in my neck in the C5-6 area, which I had surgery for. I was in what's called the Miami J collar for 42 days afterwards. I still had a lot of numbness and tingling afterwards, and it got a little bit better, but my hand never got better. I had a second surgery on it a year later, and it didn't make any difference. So finally, I did go to a specialist at New England Baptist in Boston and just had surgery again for the third time on my hand in July. And I'm very happy to say that I can feel my fingers now.
You still have the apparatus.
I still do, because there's still a lot of damage that needs to heal. But I had 48 stitches in all of the incisions that he made.
And Lynn, you had your whole, with that headbutt situation, your heart was kind of shifted?
Yeah, the first headbutt subluxated my jaw, so I've lost approximately 11% of opening of my mouth, so it's difficult sometimes to eat foods that you take for granted. When she headbutted me the second time, my sternum and my rib cage pushed over a couple of inches to the left, and when there's that much of a significant shift of your body, the internal organs get pushed and pulled around, and it actually injured my heart. So I have had 9 hours, 4.5 hours approximately, of cardiac procedures because my heart, for lack of another term, the exterior was, the electrical system was damaged, and my heart would go into runs of VTAC. And Carylyn and I have pretty much only had each other this whole time for surgeries, that I would drive her, she would drive me, she would stay at my house. And we have our families, but because we both understand intimately the medical backgrounds of each other and what's going on, and the effects of the medications and stuff, when we're coming out of it and we're crying or we're screaming. At one surgery, Carylyn had thought I was dead, and another time I didn't know where she was. So unfortunately, we go back to that assault over and over again with each surgery. But my arm has been reconstructed twice. I still have some damage. We're not sure what we're doing with that, with numbness and tingling, actually in both arms. The last cardiac surgery was at Brigham and Women's on July 6th, and I have to go for my follow-up. We don't know if that surgery has corrected the problem. So it's very significant injuries.
The reason I asked about the injuries again is because if I were to actually go up to somebody and beat them like that, wouldn't that be considered a felony?
Yes.
We would think so.
How do we get to somebody who injures you like this to a no pros?
Apparently, Robert Walsh, who was the county attorney, he had been appointed at that point. And to take that position.
He was appointed by John Lynch.
Governor Lynch.
Margaret Wagling went to become a Superior Court judge, I believe.
Okay,
so there was an opening.
Chosen and appointed to this position. And
Executive Council.
In interviews with WMUR, several newspaper articles, in conversation with Chief Aspinwall, he admitted that he didn't open the file. He admitted that he listened to his best friend, who we believe is one of the lawyers. He wanted to utilize the Nashua Mental Health Court to its fullest, but yet our understanding, or at least at Manchester Health Court, they have said they do not take accused felons. So even based on the one felony charge that originally was there that disappeared, she shouldn't have been admitted into that. It's Robert Walsh just did an interview in August in Bedford on Bedford Cable, and he said that it was for petty crimes. Well, based on these surgeries and injuries and what we've gone through, how can anybody say that's a petty crime?
What's the sticky note?
Oh, there was a sticky note. The day that we went to court on August 11th, and Ross McLeod came up to us, in the meeting afterwards, after the null pros, and we're like, what do you mean she's walking free? Where's she going? We said, why has no one contacted us? Why did you not call us? Why do we not know what the charges are? What do you mean? What is mental health court? And he said, well, I got a sticky note on my desk this morning. I came back from a week or two vacation, and the note was from my boss, Robert Walsh, and it said, we're all set. Everybody's in agreement. Go plead this case. He never once thought
to call you,
to call us.
No.
Or
do you have an attorney on this?
When it's a felony, the state appoints you a prosecutor.
Who was the prosecutor?
We don't know, because we never knew what the charges were. So we didn't know there was a felony. We didn't know if it was a misdemeanor. If it's a misdemeanor, it should be the local police department, but no one contacted us, and we had no idea whether it was misdemeanors or felonies, so who are we going to call? At no point was that ever decided, and that's because Robert Walsh, on day one, decided, for whatever reason, he was going to get rid of this, he was going to help his friend, and that he only would prosecute cases that he was sure was going to win. How does this not win? How is someone not upset? He even went so far as to keep Chief Aspinwall out of the loop. Chief Aspinwall called him, I believe, one or two times to say, I know he called him once and said, you need to get on top of this. These are two people that work with our fire department, with my police officers. They work in Amherst, a few other details, and he blew him off.
What happened to you could also happen to police officers, could also happen to fire.
Essentially could. Generally, firefighters have a larger group. Essentially, it could happen to them, but they travel in large groups.
Right.
So there's always more people. So I think...
That's just off the side, but I'm curious. Robert Walsh, is he in partnership, or is he associated with anybody? Who are her lawyers? Let me ask you that. J.C.
Sakalarius Sr. and David Balinson. And Robert Walsh had the same address as the two of them on Elm Street. I couldn't tell you the number, but listed he had the same address as them. So I don't know if they just shared the same building or they actually shared offices, but seems to me that there was some kind of relationship there.
Not sure at this point, but at least that
well, they're in the same relationship, whether that's friendship or whatever, but they're in the same building.
To at least a second look, anyway.
Well, in the paper, he admitted that he shouldn't have listened to his best friend.
And who is his best friend?
Jean-Claude Sacalarius.
Who is her representative?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a potential felony dropped to a misdemeanor?
A misdemeanor and then
null pros.
And then null pros.
Let me ask you, is there a restraining order against her?
We attempted to get one. It was not explained to us on August 11th that there was a no contact order hidden in this agreement with mental health court. So we approached Milford District Court and said we would like a restraining order. It was not explained to us that a restraining order belongs in Superior Court, so it was titled a stalking order, which obviously it wasn't, but we did ask for protection, and we went to court in October for that, and Judge Crocker denied us that. She went so far as to say that she didn't feel this was a personal attack.
All right, let me stop right there. Did she at any point recognize you in court?
Yes, she did.
Did she make any gestures to you?
She recognized us in court when we went to the Nashua District Court because she had assaulted 2 Nashua police officers. And we went there for a couple of reasons. The first reason was to support them. Lynn had worked with at least one of them in her time in Nashua working for Rockingham. And the second reason was because we wanted to find out if they would be treated the same way that we were during our case. And we went in there, when we first arrived, pulled into the parking lot, Jean-Claude Sacalarius was there, saw us, immediately got on his cell phone for whatever reason. We walked into the courthouse. We found out where it was going to be. We went in there, we sat in the back, and the place was mobbed with people.
It was a public
session. I mean, it was for not just for her, it was for a lot of people. And so we just went and sat down and thought we were just going to see what happened.
What were the charges?
What were the charges?
And what was going to be the outcome, if anything?
Right. And she was not there yet. Her attorney had to speak for her, that she was on her way, but she had not gotten there yet. So she was between a half hour and 45 minutes late for her own arraignment. And so we just sat there quietly. We didn't even speak to each other. We just sat there. And finally she came in, and she and her mother this time sat directly behind us. And we just,
oh my goodness.
We just let it go, you know.
I was having difficulty breathing.
I just kept going like this. It's okay, it's okay,
oh,
it's okay, it's okay. And
don't breathe, don't turn your head,
don't turn,
saying,
just
oh,
don't
just
engage.
awful. Yeah.
And then as cases were coming up, there was more spaces.
Movement and spacing, yeah.
Yeah. So they got up from behind us to sitting directly in front of us.
Which was directly behind her 2 lawyers.
Her 2 lawyers.
Okay.
Now, she was dressed in a black suit with a skirt. She looked very much like an attorney. She is a law student. And
second-year law student from Brooklyn Law, which her attorney repeatedly says in the 15 or so times that we've been to court to observe or whatever, every single time he will stand there and say, Your Honor, she has a full boat scholarship, she's a second-year law student from Brooklyn. You must understand, you know, we don't want to ruin her life. What about our lives?
Right.
I mean, to hear this constantly
Did she turn
is
around
scary.
at that point and look at you?
All of a sudden, we were just sitting there kind of observing everything that was going on with other cases, and she turned around and kind of came up and around to us and said, "You're those 2 EMTs. I know. What are you doing here? You're violating your own restraining order." And it was loud enough for her attorneys to turn around
and grab her and try to bring her
try
down.
and
She was leaning
get her-
so far over that the two of us
were
like this, and I'm afraid she's going to mess up her back even more. And she, you know, with the whole incident from the assault and the spitting, I'm just leaning back. I don't need any more exposure to who knows what diseases. Nobody stops her. The court officer doesn't do anything, nothing. Just her mother grabs her and pulls her around, and the lawyer pulls her around, and then he goes scurrying up to the court officer, and all of a sudden, oh, it's being moved to another day. Boom, they're out of the courtroom. No one comes to us. No one says, "What did she say to you?" Here we go again.
Have you contacted Stephen King?
No, make a really good movie, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
It's spooky in a way.
Well, it's scary how at no point is this person held accountable in any way, shape, or form. Attacks 2 EMTs. She attacks 2 police officers. She pulled a fire alarm in a hospital. When does this end? And quite frankly, as we all know, we have people that have severe mental illness that are in jail and they get their medications there. Why is this any different? Why are we constantly hit in the face with she's a second-year law student? Why are our lives apparently not as important? You have to remember, when EMS, even fire, even police, respond to a 911 call, you're invited to the house.
Right. Yes.
You are called. We don't just walk along and go, "Oh, there's a fire," and we all show up. And in this case, her father called us and said, "She's having difficulty breathing." And he knew all along. In fact, he actually, to backtrack, had admitted that he was afraid to transport her. So there was knowledge ahead of time, and yet this has all been buried. And for what reason? What did we do?
All right. Now, I want to just bring up something that's totally off topic.
Okay.
You're a Democrat.
Yes.
You're
Don't
a
say
Republican.
it like that.
No, hang on. I didn't say that. I said you're a Democrat. You're a Republican.
I am.
Okay, the reason I bring that up is because you brought in some political figures here.
Yes.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with politics.
It has nothing to do with politics. Even though I'm a Democrat, I vote for the person that I think is going to make the best.
Absolutely.
And really,
whatever.
Even that's not the issue.
No,
It's just the
you
fact
need
that
to do your job. Justice is justice,
Right.
Right.
and right is right, and wrong is wrong. And it just really seems that this was from day one.
this is not politically driven. This is
Absolutely
just, we're
not.
trying to get to
We're
the bottom
just
of
trying to. We're just trying to get some help from someone. Now, when Robert Walsh ran for Hillsborough County Attorney, he ran against Dennis Hogan. We didn't know who he was. But after the election and when Dennis Hogan took office in January, we were talking and said, well,
Let's
why
call.
don't
Let's
call?
see.
Why don't we
Maybe
call?
he can do something, or maybe he can explain what's going on. Maybe he can say what happened. And Dennis Hogan re-indicted her.
Oh.
He fought for us. He opened his entire office, answered all our questions. He made prosecutors available to us, and they came to court with us. He even gave us a crime victim advocate, which we had never had to that point, which you are entitled to as a victim of a violent crime.
When I called him, I left a message.
Called who?
I called Dennis Hogan. I left a message. I didn't expect to hear from him at all. I had talked to Governor Lynch and never heard anything so I figured we were not going to get anything from him. About an hour later, he returned my call. And so he said, well, what can I do for you? What do you need? I said, I would like you to meet with us face to face. I think it means a lot more than a telephone conversation. And he said, okay, we can do that. How about 2 o'clock tomorrow? I was stunned.
So
This is the first person that took the bull by the horns.
Is this ongoing now?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Well, we're going to close this show at this point because I'm running out of time. I really want to thank you for coming on the show. I want to thank you for coming on Speak Up. And I want to thank you people for watching. And if you want to support the show, please, by all means, email us at speakupnh@gmail.com or send us a letter at 68 Bartimus Trail, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03063. Ladies, thank you very much, and I really wish you the best.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for letting us tell our story and let people know.
Unedited.
Yes, unedited.
Unedited, yes.
Until next week.